Scripture to consider before the news. And the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. The kings of the east will become prominent leading into the battle of Armageddon. This will be after the alien deception comes to a climax. And he gathered them together into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. The kings of the east are joining forces as we speak. Now unto the news. Iran, China sign huge 25-year strategic deal, could reduce U.S. regional influence. Beijing to invest $400 billion in Iran in exchange for oil, report says. Agreement will strengthen military ties and may undermine U.S. leverage in Middle East. Iran and China on Saturday signed a 25-year strategic cooperation agreement addressing economic issues amid crippling U.S. sanctions on Tehran, according to Iranian state media. The agreement, dubbed the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, covers a variety of economic activity from oil and mining to promoting industrial activity in Iran, as well as transportation and agricultural collaborations, according to the report. No additional details of the agreement were revealed as Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif and Chinese counterpart and Jesuit-educated Wang Yi took part in a ceremony marking the event. China's Iran visit represents shift for the region. For Iran, the visit by Jesuit-educated Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi to Tehran on an official two-day visit to hold talks with senior officials on the strategic relations is of great importance. Iran matters to China and the visit illustrates the importance that Tehran also sees in Beijing. The Chinese foreign minister is on a visit to several nations in the region, including Iran, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Oman, the UAE and Turkey. This appears to showcase where Iran sees importance in the region. Several of these countries are U.S. allies, but Turkey is drifting away from the West, and Iran is hostile to the U.S. That is important because China is currently sanctioning UK lawmakers in response to critique and sanctions over its policies. Why this matters is because Iranian media has discussed a 25-year agreement with China. On Thursday, Reuters reported that China will make efforts to safeguard the Iran nuclear deal and defend the legitimate interests of Sino-Iranian relations, the Commerce Ministry said on Thursday. On Friday, rumors of the Iran-China deal are growing. The signing of the Comprehensive Cooperation Program of the Islamic Republic of Iran and the People's Republic of China by the foreign ministers of the two countries is another program of this two-day trip, Iran's state news agency IRNA said. This is a key regional and international development. Iran wants to leverage China's role in the region and show that it can resist the US. China also wants to reassure the West that Iran will safeguard the nuclear deal. In short, this agreement with China is symbolic of a rapid drift to the east by Iran and the anchoring of the new China-Iran framework in a world order that may one day be led more by China than the West. This isn't because Iran is an important or powerful economy. It is because China is showing it can play a role where Western leadership has been lacking. It does this by stepping in and showing that despite US rhetoric or sanctions, Beijing will do as it wants with Tehran. Beijing is also marking out other places that matter to it in the Middle East. This is part of a global, more robust Chinese foreign policy. This policy is causing concern from Australia to France and particularly in the US. Iran's media sees this as a major shift, highlighting US press reports about how this has thwarted the US, according to Faz News. There will be some pushback and critique in Iran by those who wonder if Tehran has given too much to China. Also, many wonder what is in the 25-year deal. But for Iranian President Hassan Rouhani, this is an important step. Elections are looming. He wants to show he has achieved something. In related news, senior Iranian official says the strategic deal with China expedites the end of America. A senior Iranian official praised a strategic deal with China, saying it expedited the end of America. The Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, Ali Shamkhani, wrote on Twitter that the 25-year agreement between Iran and China was part of Tehran's active resistance policy. The world isn't just the West, and the West doesn't just consist of the law-breaking United States and covenant-breaking Britain, France and Germany. Biden's concern is well-founded. The flourishing of strategic cooperation in the East will accelerate the decline of the United States, he said. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and click the notification bell so you can get notified whenever new Bible prophecy news videos are uploaded. In other news, Chances for Israeli alliance with Saudis against Iran fading. Saudi Arabia is reluctant to showcase any cooperation with Israel, including security cooperation against the Iranian regional threat. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is slated to participate at a leaders' climate summit organized by the Biden administration on April 22. With the summit online, Netanyahu will not get the chance to meet in person with Saudi King Salman bin Abdul Aziz Al Saud, also among the 40 leaders invited to the summit. For Netanyahu, if still at the helm of Israel, this would be a second wasted opportunity in just a few weeks. Israel's prime minister had hoped to meet with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman during his planned visit recently to the United Arab Emirates, UAE. But the Saudis declined the meeting even before the visit itself got cancelled. Interviewed on Ynet March 15, Netanyahu had said Israel was on its way to making peace with 4 more countries in the region, stating, "I brought 4 peace agreements," in reference to agreements with the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan and Morocco. "And there are another 4 on the way. I talked about one of them, one of the leaders in the region, yesterday." Netanyahu did not specify the 4, but analysts said that he was referring to Saudi Arabia, Oman, Qatar, and either Mauritania or Niger. Then, on March 21, 2 days only before general elections in Israel, Netanyahu referred publicly to ties with Saudi Arabia. Interviewed by the Army radio station, Netanyahu said, "We will have direct flights for Muslim Israeli pilgrims from Tel Aviv to Mecca." The promise of the Prime Minister was probably directed first and foremost at the Israeli Arab electorate, in a last-ditch effort to win their support at the voting stations. Still, Riyadh's reaction was swift and painful. On March 22, former senior advisor to the Saudi government Nawaf Obaid published an editorial in the Palestinian Al-Quds newspaper, saying his country would not normalize ties with Israel until a peace agreement establishes an independent Palestinian state. In fact, Obaid was repeating what Saudi Minister of State for Foreign Affairs Adel al-Jubeir had said March 19, that despite normalization of relations between some Arab countries and Israel, the position of the kingdom remained unchanged, stating that, "Our position remains that normalization can only come if there's an agreement on peace, with the Palestinians." Jerusalem is disappointed over Riyadh's reluctance for rapprochement, and it is not only about Netanyahu presenting to Israelis diplomatic achievements. In a February 22 column in Politico, Aaron David Miller and Richard Sokolsky wrote, "Elections have consequences. And nowhere are the consequences of Joe Biden's election more worrisome than in Jerusalem and Riyadh." In the past week, the president has signaled to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the region's 2 biggest egos, that the sugar high of the Trump years is over. Thus, Jerusalem has several reasons to be concerned. First, with President Joe Biden, Israel is losing, at least partially, its privileged status vis-a-vis the United States. Second, the country that is supposed to be Israel's main ally in an anti-Iranian axis, Saudi Arabia, is also being distanced by the Biden administration. Third, the Biden administration keeps multiplying appeasing messages to Tehran. For instance, on March 26, an unnamed American official told Reuters that as far as the United States was concerned, who might take the first step to resume compliance with the 2015 Iran nuclear deal was not an issue. All this boils down to one thing: Israel desperately needs a Biden bypassing alliance against Iran, with Saudi Arabia as the key to such an alliance. On February 25, I-24 News reported that Israel has been holding informal talks with Saudi Arabia, Bahrain and the UAE, to establish a 4-nation defense alliance. The report further claimed that the 4 countries were concerned over the growing Iranian threat in the region, on the nuclear level and also over Iranian expanding influence in Syria and Iraq. Other reports along that line appeared at the beginning of March. In an op-ed for Arab News, World Jewish Congress President Ronald Lauder called for a Middle East NATO. An unnamed Israeli official said after the article that Israel, Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Bahrain had indeed been discussing informally expanding cooperation in facing common enemies. The Prime Minister's office said in reaction it was not confirming the report, but we are always interested in upgrading ties with our Middle East partners. Clearly, all 4 countries believe a nuclear Iran would be a major regional and global threat, and they are all concerned over the Biden administration's plan to rejoin the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Still, without the backing of the Trump administration, and faced with an Israeli leader in a constant quest after photo ops, enthusiasm in Gulf countries for cooperating with Jerusalem might be fading. In fact, the emerging Israel-Saudi Emirati-Bahrain alliance against the Iranian threat now seems less and less plausible. Whoever gets to be Israel's next prime minister would have to address this issue rapidly. The White House will not be waiting for Israel to form a new government, to take its own decisions on Iran. Let's see how we will get to that covenant spoken of by Daniel the prophet by the Prince of the Covenant, which will start the final prophetic week for Israel, the 70th week. And whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. You better believe the correct gospel for the dispensation of the grace of God found in Romans chapter 3 verses 24 to 26. BeingJustified.com can help you while in the land of the living to make sure you can prove your name is in the book of life so you will not be cast into the lake of fire.